The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Tuesday. So thrilled to be back here. I hope everybody had a wonderful St. Patrick's Day yesterday and wore lovely green so you didn't get pinched. When I was a kid, we didn't have the pinching. I don't understand that. Maybe it was just an East Coast thing. I grew up on the East Coast of the United States and there was no pinching. But I always had my green on. With a name like Shannon, of course, I had to wear the green. So, and I hope that you guys had an opportunity. If you haven't already, it's there on our sites. You can watch it on YouTube. We had the wonderful Holly Robinson Pete with us on Friday. It was such a wonderful hour to spend with her. And I have to say, you know, a lot of times you see people and you see them on television or you see them in whatever movie that they're in, and you don't know if they're really like that. And she really is the real deal. What a nice person on camera and off camera. I just want you to know that what you saw here is how she is, really lovely, strong, but very kind woman, somebody that I really look up to. So definitely take a look at that interview. We had a great time with her. A lot of you wrote in questions that we didn't get to, and I promised Holly that I would forward them to her. Some of you included a way to get back. Others of you didn't. I don't know what to do about that. If you sent in a question for Holly and we didn't get to it and you know that you didn't put your email, I'll tell you what, do me a favor and today at some point send your question again and include your email where she can get back to you so that I can forward that to her, because I feel bad that she doesn't have a way to get back to you. She said she would find a way to tweet or whatever, and I will send them to her either way if you don't want to include your information, but you know, it'd be easier if there was an actual email. All right. We are going to be with you live for the next 2 hours. I'm really looking forward to it. We talk about autism from a 360-degree perspective here. And what that means, you know, I've taken to saying that quite a bit. And somebody said to me the other day, what exactly does that mean? And I said, we don't just talk about one thing. We talk about all the different things that are entailed in either having a child who's on the spectrum, or if somebody is on the spectrum themselves, the kinds of things that they will encounter. That means we'll talk about news stories that, and we're going to do that today, both the good and the bad, right? Because there's always the good and the bad. We'll talk about what it's like financially, what the pressures are, what the stress is, how we can take care of ourselves completely and be healthy and have the members of our family be healthy, both physically and mentally. And then everything else on top of that, because we want to be able to get to progress. And we do talk about ABA here a lot, and we are going to talk about ABA a lot this week. And I, this year, have said I really want to talk about quality ABA, because as more and more people are getting ABA, I'm seeing and I'm hearing from all of you that sometimes the ABA that you're getting is not up to par with what we really need it to be for you to be able to see that progress. We know that it's not all created equally, so it's important. I know when I started quality ABA with my child, I didn't know what quality ABA was. And there was a moment in which I kind of thought that's what all ABA was. I didn't know how lucky I was, right? I want you to know, if you are lucky, how lucky you are. And if you aren't being lucky, I want to be able to tell you what you need to do to get to that space where you can say, yeah, I'm really lucky. I'm getting quality ABA as well. And why? And why? That, I think that's as important as anything else, because when you know why you want to get quality ABA therapy, then you go, okay, I want to do that. But to say that and to do that, it really is not the only thing that you need to do, right? If all we ever did was quality ABA therapy, but we didn't take care of the child's medical health, right? We're not going to get as far. If we're trying to do quality ABA therapy and you lose your home and you're homeless, it's going to be really difficult to do quality ABA. I remember saying to somebody, well, if we have to, we'll do it from a cardboard box. But the reality, those some big words, right? But the reality is that we need to keep our kids safe. We need to keep them interested. We got to make things reinforcing for them, and we have to make it reinforcing for ourselves in order to get to all that progress. It really is a very multifaceted journey, this journey through autism, and it is not one size fits all. And we're really going to take a little bit of time today to talk about that very specifically in just a little while. During the show, when we were having Holly Robinson Pete on the other day, someone was tweeting us, and they tweeted us several times with a question that really touched all of our hearts here at Autism Live, and it's something that I wanted to take some time to address, because they said, what about the kids who are more profoundly affected? And why do I always feel like my child who is not on the Aspie ends of things is always being left out? And we're really going to delve into that a little bit today. So all of this, that's why I say 360 degrees. There's so much to talk about. But the whole thing is meant to be interactive. We really want you to drive the bus here. We want you to tell us what you're interested in hearing about, what's tearing your ticket. I love that this dad wrote into us and said, it bugs me that you don't talk about this. So we're going to talk about it today. But Emily's going to show you some of the different ways that you can get in touch with us here so that you can be interactive with us and have your voice be heard. Tell us the topics that you want to cover, ask the questions that you want to ask so we can ask them of the experts that we have here on the show. I will remind you while Emily is showing you this that autism-live.com is our home page. You can absolutely go there and find lots of information. You can click on the blog, but there's also a desktop, a virtual desktop there. And on the desktop sits a computer. And if you click on the triangle that's on the computer screen, you can be watching the live show or the most recently recorded live show. To the side of that, it says there's a white box that says Shannon is answering right now, and I think it's still saying one of the questions that we asked Holly, it is, but then underneath that it says your question, and in that white box put your cursor there, start typing and hit enter. You will find, much probably to your surprise, I'm going to take that other question off right now. Did you see it disappear? You will find that when you hit enter, that's all there is to it. You are not being asked to log in. It's not a club that you have to belong to. Nobody knows your name or your credit card number or your address, right? It's completely anonymous and it's completely free. And I think that that's really rather remarkable. It does have its drawbacks. It does mean that if you don't tell us who you are and where we can get in touch with you, then the only way that we have to talk is here, which is totally fine. But if you do want more information from us, you will have to give us more information. And I always like to remind, and I know I remember to do this always when we have Dr. Grandpichet here, but no one on the show can give you child-specific or individual-specific advice, right? There is no way in this format that we could know enough. Now, having said that, there's a lot that we can talk about that hopefully will help you to figure out what direction you want to go in next. Sometimes it's even about which question do you want to ask next. I've always said that if you don't even know the questions to ask, then you're really mired in the mud, right? I love recommending having a support group that is local and a support group that's more global. And even if you don't participate in it on a daily basis, I love to get a daily digest from my local TACA group. And I see the questions that people ask. And a lot of times the questions that other people ask inform me about what I don't know about. So, the first time that I saw somebody saying, how many hours of respite do you get? And I said, what do you mean you're getting respite hours? Does that mean somebody's funding it? Come to find out, yes. Respite was available to me and I hadn't asked for it because I didn't even know it was available. I honestly, I don't think at that point I even knew what the word respite meant. It wasn't a part of my life. So sometimes just hearing what other people's questions are amazing. There's no bad or wrong question. Ask them all, and we encourage you to ask them here and participate as much as you can and would like to. And again, Emily showed you there's lots of other ways to participate, but that live feature is a very quick and pretty instant gratification, right? That's what it is, instant gratification and free. So I also like to remind you, at the start of the show that while we do have a lot of experts on the show, and we're going to be talking to a great expert a little bit later on in the show, I always remind you that I am not one of those experts. That's just not who I am. I am a parent, and my son, and I'm a former teacher too. I do like to add that in as well. My son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5, my one and only child. And, when I look back on that day and I see how much it shifted our lives, I was not a happy camper about it in the beginning. And I wouldn't say that I'm a happy camper about it right now, but I love our lives because my son got help. And because of that help, he made progress. And I remember early on saying to the person who helped direct me in that, so that I got the help and found the way to pay for it, I remember saying to her, how am I ever going to pay you back? And she said, oh, you're not going to pay me back. You're going to pay it forward. So please know that I sit here in honor of her and what she taught me to pay it forward. And I take that really seriously. So if you need some help, please write into us and tell us what it is you're looking for, and we'll do everything that we can. I don't, everything short of, I don't have a directive to perform miracles, right? But I can be a support and help connect you with people who can also support you. And I want to do that for each and every one of you. So write in when you need something and let us know what's going on. Sometimes it takes us a while, and sometimes you have to be a little persistent and say, I need this, but we try to help as much as we possibly can. That's my promise to you. All right. We like to start every morning with something that we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym, and we try to make sense of it. I've had some people who say to me, why are you still doing this? Because I'm learning more jargon. I've been on this path now for over 8 years, and somebody will say something and I go, what's that? I don't know what that is. How would I know what that is? And sometimes you look it up on the internet and you find the definition and you go, that doesn't help me. I'm no closer to understanding what that is. I think it's important that we empower ourselves at every single juncture that we can. Empowerment without overwhelming ourselves, right? Because it's easy to get overwhelmed by this jargon. So if we take one word, one phrase a day, and we try to make sense of it, hopefully, and I see in the questions that you guys write, that over time we build up these terms and we begin to understand them, and that makes us more effective, it makes us more efficient, and we're going to get more done. And that's really the name of the game, right? Okay, so today's term, every once in a while, we return to these things and it makes sense with our theme today. We're defining what is ABA. And I know a lot of you watch the show on a regular basis and you go, really? But we have new people who tune in every day, and we want to make sure that this is a term that we completely understand. So ABA, we start out with our actual definition, and ABA stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. Now, do you want to know a trick? I didn't know this for years, but one of the ways that people gauge whether they think you know what you're talking about, and this is a good thing for parents to know, is that when you talk about ABA, either say ABA or say Applied Behavior Analysis. If you make the mistake that I frequently was guilty of before I was hanging around with a bunch of BCBAs, if you say Applied Behavioral Analysis, then they think, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. So make sure you say Applied Behavior Analysis, no behavioral. It's just one of those things that they go, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, so here's our definition: the application of the principles of learning and motivation from behavior analysis. Don't you love it when people use the actual words from the phrase in the definition? It drives me buggy. It employs procedures and technology derived from scientifically demonstrated principles of behavior to increase socially significant behaviors and decrease unwanted or inappropriate behaviors, okay? And that's socially significant behaviors and that we want to increase, and that decreasing of unwanted, inappropriate behaviors, that's the core of what we really want to talk about. So let's take a look at our working definition for ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. It's a proven method of increasing or teaching desired behavior and reducing unwanted behavior. So when we're looking at any child, and really I already blew it because I said child, and the point of ABA is that it isn't just for children. It's for all living things, right? That there are a set of rules that govern behavior. So anything that engages in behavior, we can modify the behavior, and we can say, I want to teach a behavior because it's a desired behavior. And using the principles of behavior, we can teach behavior that is desired. And we can also teach undesired behavior to go away as well. So we can increase behaviors we want to see and decrease behaviors that we don't want to see. We already do this, you and I, all the time. We just don't do it as efficiently and as effectively as we want to do. The example that I always go to is that my child, when he was diagnosed with autism, was engaging in self-injurious behavior. He was hitting his head on the kitchen floor. Now, if you had asked me, was I in any way encouraging that behavior, those would have been fighting words. I would have said to you, are you out of your mind? I love that little boy with every fiber of my being. Why would I encourage him to hurt himself? That hurts my feelings even now to think about it. And yet, by my actions and through the rules of behavior, I was. I didn't know I was, but I was, because somewhere down the line, when my child hit his head on the floor, what I taught him was good things are going to happen after you hurt yourself. Because I scooped him up and I loved him up and I rubbed his head and I rocked him and I probably breastfed him and cooed to him and sang to him and did all the things that he loved. And in his head, the little wires connected and said, I hit my head and mom does this. Kaboom, good stuff happens. So he started doing it more often. And I would continue to scoop him up because I didn't want him to hurt himself, and I didn't want him to cry, and I would rub his head and rock him and do all these things. I sure didn't realize that what I was doing was telling him, hurt yourself, and then you'll get all the things that you want in life. I had to have somebody from the outside, a therapist, come in and redirect me and put that reward on behavior that I wanted to see, which was that I wanted for him to communicate with me in whatever way that he could. And they helped me to do that in a way so that he couldn't hurt himself, and that I understood the power of my actions and where and when I placed them. And that's really what ABA is all about, that we make sure, and I know people have probably heard, oh, ABA, and, they punish kids, because people tell that lie. But the truth is that when we look at applied behavior analysis, it's based on what I call principle 1, which is that in order for any behavior to become a habit, it has to have some sort of reward. So everything that you do, everything that I do, we do it because there's some sort of a paycheck. Now that paycheck might be one messed up, nasty, looks like it doesn't make any sense paycheck, right? But the truth of the matter is that if it's rewarding to us, we will keep doing that behavior. My son kept hitting his head on the kitchen floor because the paycheck that he got for it was big enough for him. And I just needed to turn that equation on its butt, right? And to start giving him a paycheck for behaviors that I wanted to see. I started rewarding the behaviors I wanted to see and not rewarding the behaviors I didn't want to see. And it did flip the whole thing. flipped it for me as a person, flipped it for me as a mom, and it flipped it for my child and made a pathway for my child to learn and to get excited about learning. And, I'm going to, tell you right now that I have so much still to learn as a parent because I still react in the moment. And then I go, man, I blew that hard and ugly, right? So this is one of those things that it's something you practice every day and you learn every day. But when we use the principles of ABA, it's empowering. It's empowering and it's positive. We're giving a reward, some sort of a paycheck for behaviors that we want to see. It is not punitive in nature. So if you're new to ABA, I'm thrilled that you're here because we're going to take a little ride on the ABA train today and all of this week. And we'll still continue to talk about the other things, but really it's a powerful week for ABA. So we like to start also every morning with a question, something that we ask you guys to answer, and we will have time today on Facebook to take a look at what you guys have answered. Here's our question. What one behavior do you wish you could change? Now, this is open-ended because a lot of times we have parents who are watching and it's a behavior of your child's that you want to change. But other times we have teachers that are watching and it might be one of your students that you want to change. And other times we take this ourselves and go, there's a behavior that I'm doing that I wish that I could change. So it could be yourself, it could be someone else. What behavior do you want to change of someone? That's all we want to know, because the truth of the matter is that we can change behavior. If we're willing to make it worthwhile enough for ourselves and for other people, we can pretty much change any behavior. And early on, when in the state of California, there are funding sources for ABA, and one of them is the regional center. And the regional center, though, wants to make sure that parents are going to use their training well, and that they'll uphold the principles of ABA. So before your child can start, before they'll fund your child to get ABA, they require the parents to go through 16 hours together, which is hard for an autism family to find 16 hours where neither parent is there and somebody else is taking care of your child. But you must go through it together, 16 hours of parent training for ABA. And man, I tell you, I still am thanking the friend who watched my child for the 16 hours so that my husband and I could do this across a 4-week period. And because I don't know, we wouldn't have gotten our funding otherwise. And it was transformative, those 16 hours, and for both my husband and I. But I remember the first day we went in and they said, what 5 behaviors would you like to change? And then from the 5, they narrowed it down and told us what they thought was the most important. But for me, I was like, is this a waste of time? And the guy said, no, because whatever we pick, we're going to be able to change that behavior. And then suddenly it was like somebody had just handed me $1 million and we were figuring out how to spend it. My husband and I were hunched over the table going, all right, should we pick this? Should we pick that? I mean, if it really can change it, what are we going to do? And I'll tell you, we ended up with 2 things on the list. One was that we could not get our child to go to sleep. We were driving the car around at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to get him to go to sleep. And the other was that self-injurious behavior. And because I was like, I can't, it makes me sick when he tries to hurt himself. And the person who was leading the class said, we have to take on the sleep first, because what we're going to need to do to stop the self-injurious behavior, you're going to have to be more rested. And within a week, we had our child, and nobody had come to our home, but using the principles of ABA that we learned in that class, we had our child going to sleep by 9 o'clock at night without having to take a trip in a car. Cue the angels singing. I'm telling you, it was absolutely amazing. So I want to play that game a little bit with you guys. What one behavior do you wish you could change? And let's take it on a little bit later on this hour, and we'll have some of our experts weigh in a little bit later on in the week. Okay, we always have a topic of the week that we like to talk about with you, and I'm so excited because in the month of March we're talking about advances in autism, and so this week it's advances in behavior treatment. I said recently to somebody, this is not your mama's ABA anymore. I know that there is this old-fashioned, broken down image of ABA that everybody has from 1991. And there are all these rumors that circulate about ABA, and I just want to dispel that. ABA is amazing and cutting edge, and there's scientific proof to show that it's effective, and it's something that we need to overcome all of the objections personally, and we need to overcome all of the financial hardships globally that surround ABA so that we can get to the good stuff and to the progress, and that's what ABA does. So we're going to introduce some of the new things that are happening in ABA so you don't think of it as something that's just stale and worn out, right? We've got some amazing guests to talk about those things this week. Very excited about it. So some of the different things that we have going on today on the show, we are going to go over some ABA basics. We've got some autism news that we want to talk about that is upsetting in nature, I'm going to be honest with you, but it's something that we need to talk about because when bad things happen, we need to learn from them, right? And then in the next hour, at the top of the hour, really, we're going to have Thomas Higbee, who is an amazing gentleman. Can't wait. We're going to talk with him about video modeling. I know that a couple of months ago, we had Angela Persicki on, who's a BCBA, and she was talking about research having to do with video modeling and teaching teenagers social skills. And so many of you have written in about that study and said, where can I find out more about this? Is there other stuff that we can do video modeling with? And so I asked around and I said, who's the person? Who's the person that we can talk about video modeling with? And I was told that it is Dr. Thomas Higbee, and he is coming to us from State University of Utah. So that will be at the top of the hour. You're not going to want to miss that. But ever so much more that we have to talk about. And we're going to start, we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about some tweets that we got during the Holly Robinson Pete show about what about our kids who are more profoundly affected, and why do they constantly get left out of the conversation. Really touched all of us here at Autism Live, the many, many tweets that we got from a dad, and I want to make sure that we address this. So stick with us.
Hello there, fellow activist. You're an activist because you're making the world a better place for someone living with autism. Now on Autism Live, you learn all about your children. You learn about their bodies and their brains. But this empowerment moment is all about you. It's about your heart and your soul. Now don't worry, I'm not going to have you start singing Kumbaya or doing chanting. Let's talk about blessings. One of the blessings of living with a child with autism is learning to love them unconditionally. Learning to love them despite all the ups and downs, all the sacrifices. In fact, you learn to love them more so because of them. I call this my empowerment prayer. God grant me the wisdom to see my disability as an opportunity, the courage to love my child unconditionally, and the faith to live a life of purpose. So going from the sublime to the ridiculous, I have a little song for you today. It's a rap song, so I know that an old or, middle-aged white woman rapping just doesn't seem right, but I'm gonna go for it anyway. My style is a little like Nicki Minaj meets Dr. Seuss. Nancy's Autism Rap. It's just a diagnosis, your life's not over. Don't lay there like a dog, get up, Rover. You say your head is spinning with GF, CF, ABA, IEPs, and neurofeedback? Autism tough, that much is true, but you'll survive because you're you. Your life's not over, it's just begun, so walk out that door and go be someone. More Dr. Seuss than Nicki Minaj. Until next time, stay strong and keep the faith.
Welcome back to Autism Live. On our live feature, I just saw that somebody had written in and said, hey Shannon, what is ABA therapy and how does it help people on the autism spectrum? Is ABA therapy only for children or can adults get ABA therapy as well? Which feeds into what we were just talking about. I just defined ABA for you and I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about what is therapy, and then I want to get to answering some of the concerns that we had somebody who tweeted in a lot during the Holly Robinson Pete show, and I want to address, because their question was, what about the kids who are more profoundly affected by autism and why are they always left out of the conversation? And it all kind of feeds together. So first of all, when we talk about ABA therapy, and we just talked about what ABA is, applied behavior analysis, and when we use this for therapy, we're going to use the principles of ABA to teach skills and to decrease behaviors that we want to see less of. That's really what it boils down to. I mean, it's much more complex than that, but that is really what it boils down to. And I want to be sure that you know that when people are doing quality ABA therapy, they're using lots of different techniques within the scope of the realm of all those different things that we know about behavior in order to get it done. And that's going to mean different things for different people. But I want to be clear that ABA is for all beings that exhibit behavior. So you can use the principles of ABA on a rabbit. You can, and they did all kinds of testing early on rats and mice, but it absolutely works on adults, it absolutely works on children, and it works on people who aren't on the spectrum, and it works on people who are on the spectrum. And we know that to be scientifically true. That has been proven hundreds and thousands of times. So ABA, I will remind you that Olympic athletes train using the principles of ABA, that people in corporations use the principles of ABA to get their productivity higher, to make people happier, and to make them produce more. And we absolutely know for a fact that ABA is effective in treating individuals who are on the autism spectrum. And that does not mean just children. It's also effective for treating adults who are on the autism spectrum. Okay, so level playing field in terms of can everyone grow and progress using the principles of ABA? The answer is yes. Will it mean using different techniques? Imagine if we all sat down with a blank canvas and we were all going to paint a picture and we didn't decide what the picture was going to be. And you know, one person would use paint and they would use a certain paintbrush and they would get the effect that they wanted. Somebody else might decide to do collage and they would cut out different pieces of fabric and different pieces of cardboard and do the collage to do the picture. Someone else might find some other medium to do. They might, we've been practicing at home melting crayons in a canvas, right? But we're all still painting. And I want everybody to know that in ABA, you use lots of different tools. And one of the things that we talk about here is giving you the tool belt to have those different tools in your tool belt. So imagine that you've got a 4-year-old who's on the autism spectrum, and what they like is, it's a little girl and she likes tea parties. So the reward that we're going to give her for overcoming the things that are difficult for her, we're going to do tea parties with her. And we're going to use that as a tool to help teach her behaviors that we want her to learn. And we're going to help her to want to earn those things by offering that tea party as the reward. And when she doesn't engage in those things, we're not going to punish her, but we're just not going to engage in the tea party with her. So she's going to want to do those things in order to win the tea party. Now that's not going to work for a 12-year-old boy who doesn't like tea parties, right? So I want you to know that there are many different ways in which we teach with ABA, and beyond just what the rewards are, they're different tools. Sometimes we use DTT, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the week. Sometimes they use pivotal response training. There are lots of different techniques that a qualified BCBA or a qualified ABA therapist can use to help engage that other person and get them interested in doing whatever the task is that we're trying to learn. And there are very specific ways that we can intervene to encourage them not to engage in this behavior that there used to be a reward for, that we're not giving a reward for it anymore. Okay, so ABA therapy is very effective at creating progress no matter where you are on the spectrum. Now, we had someone tweet into us several times on the show talking about the dad of a child who is on the spectrum, and the dad was really saying, why don't we ever talk about the kids who are more profoundly affected, and why does it seem like so much attention is given to that ASSERT group that's very high functioning and that's good at computers, and why are we always leaving out the kids who are more profoundly affected? And first of all, I want to start and apologize and say, if that's what it seems like, I would never want that to be the reality. But here's where part of the issue is, and I'm going to talk very frankly about this, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but part of the difficulty is that for so many years, so many of our kids didn't get the therapy that they needed and the therapy that they deserved, and that is not the parents' fault. That is not the parents' fault at all. It wasn't available, and even when it was available, there wasn't the funding so that anybody could reasonably afford it. So few people 20 years ago had the opportunity to get ABA for their children. And that's such a disappointment in our autism community. So we now have adults who are on the autism spectrum who are very profoundly affected that we don't know the answer to what would have happened if these particular adults had had the benefit of what so many kids have now. We're never going to know, because we know that they would have made progress and they would have made it at a bigger rate because science has clearly shown us that, but we don't know what their outcomes would have been. That is a heartbreak. And whenever I meet a parent who has one of those young people, I will tell you that there is a part of me that mourns for you at the lost opportunity from what we didn't know and what we didn't make available. But I'm also reminded that it's never over. It's never over. If you have a young person who is very profoundly affected and has not had the benefit of really good quality ABA therapy, I want to urge you to put yourself in a circumstance where you can make that happen. And that means different things based on where you live. But there is progress still to be made. That is the one thing that I know for sure, is that there is still progress even with those adults. Yes, I know we don't know what the outcome will be. The science is still not there for showing that those tremendous leaps and bounds of progress can be made with people in that age range. But let's not give up on anyone. We know that when people have used ABA with older individuals on the spectrum, that they have made progress, and progress is progress is progress is progress, right? So I want to encourage you. I feel your frustration, and I'm frustrated for you. But I want to encourage you to come and be a part of helping your child and your family to have a piece, own land in that promise of progress. And that means starting ABA, and it's never, never, never too late. Now, part of the reason why it seems like we don't focus as much time on that group of kids who are more profoundly affected is because we're focusing on getting them the ABA as early as possible. And what we know, and this is the heartbreaking part of this conversation, is that when those kids get help, a lot of them get significantly better. So they are no longer in that category and they move into those other categories. Is that everyone? No, it is not. It is absolutely not. When I talk about the original Lovaas study, when they looked at the outcomes, they found that there were three very distinct groups of outcomes. There was the first outcome that was roughly 50% of the kids who got that early ABA, and those kids made the ultimate progress. They no longer qualified for an autism diagnosis. They were virtually indistinguishable from their peers. They were very high functioning and a lot of times had high IQ, right? And they went on to lead lives that were largely typical, as I said, virtually indistinguishable from their peers. Then there was a second group, and that comprised of about 30% of the total, the 100%. And that group made tremendous progress. Those kids went on to be very productive. They were still identified as being on the autism spectrum, and you could recognize that there were different things that they struggled with, but they had very productive lives. They worked jobs. They had relationships. They were happy. There were times that they were frustrated, but they made tremendous, tremendous progress. Then there was the third group, which was a little bit less than 20%. And in that group, they saw that they still made tremendous progress, especially in the field of adaptive skills, that these kids were able to toilet, they were able to communicate, they were able to do jobs, but the jobs were much less complicated that they could do, but they were productive members of their families. They needed additional support throughout their lives, but the parents talked about the fact that they could toilet, that they had self-respect, that they had awareness, that they could have conversations, not always vocally, but that they could communicate. Now, those parents said, wow, this is huge, and this is momentous. And by the way, in all three segments, the challenging behaviors that were preventing them from being able to connect virtually slipped away. There was still, from time to time, I still engage in challenging behavior from time to time, but largely the challenging behavior in all three categories was gone. So the quality of life for all of the individuals and the quality of life for the families had gone up exponentially. You really couldn't measure the quality of life difference, how great it was. Now, one of the things that they also discovered was in that third group, a lot of times there was a dual diagnosis, that there was I can't even say the word, comorbidities, that sometimes there was an additional diagnosis besides autism, which they felt was part and parcel of why that group didn't get to where this group or that group got to. So I would say to you, if you have a child who is very profoundly affected by autism, there are a couple of things that I want to urge you to do. Ask some questions. Is it just autism, or are there other things going on for your child? Because a lot of times when a child gets an autism diagnosis, people stop looking. They stop looking about whether there are medical issues, whether there are other cognitive issues that are going on. Know for yourself. As a parent, if it's eating you, find out what is going on, because there may be a way that the other issue can be treated that will help with treating the autism so that you can make more progress, right? So know for yourself, am I just dealing with autism, or are there other things going on? As my child, as they say, twice exceptional. I know parents whose children are thrice exceptional, that they have other challenges going on as well. Make sure that you're treating what you need to treat medically, and make sure that you understand the full extent of what is going on with your child, and then get quality ABA therapy. Please don't feel as though you missed the boat. I can't imagine what that must feel like for you, but please don't give up on yourself, and please don't give up on your child. And if you tried ABA before and it wasn't effective for you and you didn't see progress, I really want to say to you from my heart that I believe with all of my being that you did not have the quality ABA therapy that you and your child deserve. And I really want to ask you, I want to plead with you to try again. With everything that we know now, try again. And even if you're not sure, write in and let's talk about, let me help you to find a quality ABA therapy in your therapist in your area, so that you can make the progress that you know you want and that you know that is owed to your child. All of the kids in that original LOVA study made progress. And by the way, all of the children in all of the studies since then have made progress. Does the progress look different? You bet you. But at the end of the day, the fact that They made progress. Whatever it is that you're going through, if you're going through the worst of challenging behavior, when I see parents who say you don't understand, and in a minute we're going to talk about a news story of just one of those parents. I tell you that early on I have an understanding because I was there before we started ABA therapy. But like a lot of parents, we progressed out of that. I want you to have that opportunity to get further, but that comes with ABA and with some other things. And if you need some help, let's get you the help to get there. But if your child is biting, if your child is running, if your child is hitting, if your child is smearing feces, if your child is not yet toilet trained and they are over the age of 5, if your child has no ability to communicate their needs for you, we need to stop and make sure that we fix those things, because those things are happening for a reason, and you're frustrated, you're exhausted, and your child is frustrated and exhausted. And I'm telling you, there are answers. There are people who can and will help you to get through this. And if it seems like we don't talk about that, it's because we talk about getting through that and progressing to the next stage. Join us. I know that we can see progress together. Ask for help. I'm happy to help you to figure out how that's going to happen in your individual home, how you're going to get hooked up to those services. Okay? We're going to come back and talk about a story about what happens when we don't get that kind of support. Stick with us.
Hi guys, welcome back to Smarty. This month we're going to make some gluten-free Play-Doh. It's a great activity because A, I know a lot of our kids have an allergy to gluten, and B, it's super cheap and cost effective to make your own. So let's get started. The materials you'll be needing are 1 cup of white rice flour, half a cup of cornstarch, half a cup of salt, 1 tablespoon of cream of tartar, 1.5 teaspoons of vegetable oil, 1 cup of water, food coloring, a saucepan, and a spatula. So as you guys can see, I'm in my kitchen because I'm going to be using the stovetop to make the Play-Doh. First what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pot and fill it up with all the dry ingredients, okay? Now that I have my dry ingredients in the saucepan, I'm now going to add the wet ones, the vegetable oil and water. I'm going to turn the pan onto low heat and continue stirring. What I want to make sure happens is that it gets solidified and gooky looking, you'll see in a second, but not overcooked, okay? You're just trying to get the materials to kind of congeal. You know the dough is ready. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna just take it off the stovetop and let it cool. Once it's cool, then you're gonna add your coloring, and boom, you've got gluten-free Play-Doh. Well, I hope you enjoyed the Play-Doh with your kids. Until next time, craft on, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're talking about quality ABA and making sure that we ensure that every individual in the autism spectrum has the benefit of that kind of intervention, regardless of age, regardless of ability. And, it's something that I feel so passionately about. There was a story in the news last week that we covered about South Dakota, that in South Dakota they were pushing very hard to try to get insurance reform for autism passed so that a wider range of people could get access to services. And it didn't pass. It was defeated in their state legislature, and one of the things that was really, really upsetting to me was that a representative for one of the insurance companies stood up and I'm paraphrasing what she said, but she said, this is very expensive, and, I know that there are studies that say that it's effective, but, it really isn't effective at getting that great progress for all of the kids on the spectrum. And that kind of talk, just, to me, that's throwing down the gauntlet. because who gets to decide what progress is substantive? And it leaves out the very important things when they say, well, because if we say that ABA is only worth spending money on for people who are going to progress to the point where their autism is no longer visible, that is a great disservice to all of humanity. And a story that came out in the news this last week, it really drives this point home. This happened in Ireland. Callum Dale, 13 years old, had Asperger's syndrome. And this is another thing that I want to say is that a lot of time people have that assumption, oh, well, if somebody has Asperger's, and they're able to communicate, then that means that they're so much higher functioning and that they're not having difficulty with the challenging behaviors. And you guys know that that is not always the case. And this young man had a tendency when he was upset to run. And unfortunately, on the 15th of this month, so just last week, he was having a discussion with his father that he didn't like how it was going, and he ran out of the house and ran into the nearby road and sat down in the road. And I understand that this is not the first time that he had engaged in this behavior. 13 years old and very frustrated with his dad. His dad, terrified, ran out into the road, was begging him and trying to pull him off of the road, and he was unsuccessful. And a car came along and hit both of them. And it takes my breath away to say this, but Callum Dale, age 13, is no longer with us because of this. And his father is in serious condition, and his mother stood along the side of the road and watched this all in horror. Now, this is not the parents' fault, and I really have to be very clear with you that this is not their fault. They did everything that they could, and they were doing their level best, and that father may very well have sacrificed his life to try to prevent his son from doing this. But when are we going to stop and see that these kinds of families need more help and they need more support? And I will tell you that if this young man at the age of 13 had had access to really good quality ABA therapy, we can't know, but I really honestly believe with all of my heart that he would not have died in this way. Accidents happen, and we can never prevent accidents from happening, but preventing somebody from running into the road and sitting down, yes, we can prevent that. When we give somebody the ability to communicate their feelings and the understanding that they will be heard and that they do have recourse, we prevent things like this from happening. But if we are going to say, well, we're only going to invest in quality ABA for individuals who are going to get to the point where they no longer need other supports, we are going to leave people like Callum out of the equation, and we are going to continue to have these kinds of tragedies happen. I really want to empower all of us to say, first of all, we start in our homes and we make sure that we get that quality ABA therapy. And while we're going through quality ABA therapy, we get the help and support to keep our children safe, because it doesn't just automatically on day one do we teach a child not to elope. Sometimes that's one of the hardest things to do, is to teach a child not to run away. And this was a teenager, right? Still a really hard thing. So it might take 6 months or a year or 2 years to give this individual the skills that they need so that they don't have to run. And while that's happening, we have to give others support to make sure that they're safe. But we can do it. We absolutely can. So we start with ourselves. If you're watching and you have a child that's engaging in this kind of behavior, please ask for help today. There are lots of different ways that you can ask for help, and there are lots of different funding ways, different organizations who will give you funding. I always talk about Act Today. You know I love Act Today. You can go to their site, act-today.org, and you can apply for a grant today, an emergency grant, if your child is engaging in that kind of behavior and you know in your heart that you've got to stop it or something bad could happen. Please take action about that today. And then if your child is already safe, if you have had the benefit, as I have had, my child was an eloper, but I've had the benefit, then I want to beg you to please turn around and do something for someone else. Advocate for someone else. We have a campaign that we're going to be starting in April, and I'm choosing to focus here on California because that's where I am. And you know, I already have written and to support those families in South Dakota, and if there's something specifically I can do to help the families in South Dakota to help get this passed, please, you know, tell me and be specific. But Nancy Alspaugh Jackson and I have decided that, you know, the hill that we're willing to take on next is here in the state of California. Senator Darrell Steinberg has said that we need to get our Medicaid to cover, our Medi-Cal to cover ABA again. It used to, and then it was taken away in the most recent budget cut. And it is not okay for me as a parent to know that my child has the benefit of these therapies, and there are families who can't afford it, who are at the most risk, and that they are not being given access to that. Families who had that therapy and their children were progressing and they lost their funding because of budget cuts. This is not okay by me. And so Nancy and I are starting a campaign to take that on very seriously. If you've helped yourself, and that's the first thing, right? You got to put the oxygen mask on yourself and your family first. Help yourself first. But if you are getting the help that you need, help us to help other families, and we'll give you more information about how you can do that in the coming month. But let's not let this young man have died in vain. In his name today, do something for someone else so that these kinds of tragedies don't have to keep happening. And they won't if we provide quality ABA services to these families. Okay, taking a deep breath. We are going to take a pause now and go to the A Word. This is an ongoing documentary that's being made at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders following a little boy, Jack Riley, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. And this series really shows us what early intensive behavioral intervention looks like in someone's home and what quality ABA looks like. It is not an overnight, right? It takes time. And we'll take a look at some of the different things. In the recent weeks, they've been working with Jack Riley on stopping and going, because this is one of the early lessons that's going to help to prevent that elopement. It's not the be-all end-all. It's not the only lesson that's going to prevent that elopement, but we're rewarding him for stopping when the mom or someone else says stop, and we're giving him the opportunity to go right afterwards so that it's worth his while to stop. But let's tune in this week and see what's happening with Jack Riley. After this interview, we are so thrilled that we are going to have with us Dr. Thomas Higbee, and he's going to be talking with us about video modeling. So stick with us and first watch the A Word.
This is Jack's morning routine. He just got out of bed. He's a happy guy. He's sitting with Dad, drinking some milk, watching some tunes. Hi, Jack.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How old are you, Jack?
2.
How old are you, Jack? Can you say good morning? Good morning. Good morning. Good. That's good. That's good. Sometimes he arranges the coins lately. It's been, used to just put them straight in the piggy bank, and now he likes to play with them and arrange them. Nice.
Good job. Say more. Oh, good. That was a good M. Nice building. Good. More. Here you go. Yeah, we definitely want his scores to increase with him talking more. Because he knows everything and he knows what everything is, but you're just getting him to independently ask for things. Because we want to get him to man for things. At least
What are you
20
saying?
times
What's the
now.
word you're using?
Manned.
Manned?
Manned.
As in?
Like requesting.
Okay.
So he can say like the object, like he can say train, or he can say more, or he can say all done, anything to communicate with you. Because he has a language. I don't think we give him enough opportunities to
okay.
ask for things or
That
ask
makes
for
sense.
things.
That makes sense.
We just have to require it more.
Yeah, and then after that, we'll move into more frames such as like, I want train,
Okay.
I want this.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So I have
Is
Dad
that
hold
close?
the train, and then have Daddy.
Daddy's
Look,
here.
Daddy has the train. So Mike, have him ask you for the tracks. You can even just hold it out in front of him, and then he'll even ask you.
More?
Okay. So here we go. Yeah, good talking. Very good. I've never seen him play train so intricately before.
He's been pretty much daily. He's asked for his train once.
Can you say, give me? Okay.
Thank you. Good talking.
There
Good
you
talking,
go.
buddy. Good asking. Good asking.
Yeah, definitely his 2 syllables are just
Yeah.
coming along really well.
Yeah. I mean, most of them are approximations, but they're the same every time. He's a little sedate today, actually. I'm surprised. Excuse me. He gets concerned when I sneeze and cough. Daddy, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay.
Oh,
See that?
that's the closest
See
it sounded.
Cheryl thought of that.
Cute, Dad.
Can you say I love you? That's I love you. Same every time. It's kind of like yellow, but
Yeah.
yellow doesn't melt us like that.
Hi, we're gonna be working on some pictures. Let me get your picture first. What is it? Hands. Very good. Here you go. Here you go. He's doing a lot of imitating things, and in clinic the other day, we noticed that every time he said "look at me," he'd repeat it, but in his own way, so it comes out as "baby." So every time he goes "look at me," he's like "baby, baby." What is it? Hands. Hey, over here. Look at me. Look at me. No, over here. Look at me. Right here. There we go. That is a train. We'll play with it in just a second, okay? Hey, look at me. Now look at me. Right here. There are your eyes. What is it? Hands. Okay, you can go. Good job. Okay, go play. Do you want the book or the trains? Book or trains? Trains. Okay, good. Go play. Go play with your trains. Go ahead. You can go play now. Oh, you want to look at the pictures? More? More pictures? Here, you can look at the pictures. Here, want to show Suzanne what you know? How about let's look at the ones that you do know? Those are the ones that you don't know. Bunny. Wow, guess you know a lot more than I thought. What's that one?
Oh, this one. Da 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 da.
Shop.
You are so smart.
Touch it.
Tiger.
Nice.
Good job. Okay, what else? What's this one? Ellie. Oh, it's getting closer. Elephant. It's getting closer. Lion. You do know a lot of animals.
Between last week and today, Jack is able to label more cards. He's interested in identifying the images and consequently building his vocabulary. As the weeks progress in his ABA therapy, so has his skills. In 2 months, he's gone from babbling to enunciating certain words clearly. With prompting, he's able to practice appropriate speech when playing and requesting objects. Eventually, the prompting will fade and he will do it on his own. Each new skill acquired builds on the previous one.
You're interested again? Here, why don't you go over there? Go over here and you can see better. What's that? Ooh, you want to move it for me? Show me your train.
Say choo-choo. Yeah, move it.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are so thrilled to be welcoming for the first time here on the show via Skype, Dr. Tom Higbee. He is coming to us from the Utah State University in Utah, and he is also the director of the Autism Support Services Education, Research, and Training Program, otherwise known as ASSERT. Dr. Higbee, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Shannon. It's great to be here.
So let's start by explain to us exactly what ASSERT is.
Okay, ASSERT is a university-based intensive behavior analytic preschool program for kids on the autism spectrum. We serve about 10 kids preschool age, 3 to 5, here on the on-campus program, which is not unique. But the unique features of our program are that we serve as a training site. All of the early childhood special education majors here in our department do internships at ASSERT. I have a team of doctoral students who work with me who are being trained in how to do evidence-based practices in terms of interventions and assessments for kids with autism. And then we also do a lot of outreach to our local school districts here in Utah through the ASSERT program to help bring them up to speed on evidence-based practices for kids on the autism spectrum.
Well, we all know how important it is to get the next generation of experts and the next generation of therapists trained properly, so I salute you for the work that you're doing. And is there a website that people in Utah can go to if they want to know more about ASSERT?
Yeah, if you Google my name, you'll be able to find it.
Okay.
Or you can go to our department webpage, which is sper.usu.edu/ASSERT, ASSERT.
Okay, great. And we have that up on the screen right now as you're talking. But Dr. Higbee, I asked you to come on the show today to talk with us about video modeling. I mentioned to you yesterday that there was a study that we talked about on the show a couple of months ago, and the response from our viewers was overwhelming. They wanted to know more about what video modeling is and when you use it. And so can you help us out and let us know what it is and when and how and with who we should use video modeling?
Sure, I'll do my best. Video modeling is a really fun intervention tool to use for kids with autism. And like most of our best tools, it works so well because it takes advantage of strengths that our kids often have. I don't know how the kids are out there where you're based in California, but many of the kids with autism here in Utah tend to be very interested in screens.
Yes.
They tend to be very interested in movies, and a lot of the kids tend to be very good memorizers. And so what we do with video modeling is we take that skill, that tendency to be interested in something and that strength, and we turn it around and say, great, you're great at copying things, you're great at imitating, not always in the appropriate circumstances. So let's use that strength to our advantage. And essentially what we do is we create a videotaped sequence, just as you would if you were scripting out a movie or a television show. But instead, we're scripting out an appropriate social interaction most of the time, although video modeling has been used to teach a variety of different skills. We videotape an appropriate social or play interaction, and then we provide our student on the autism spectrum with an opportunity to view that video, and then immediately afterwards have a chance to engage with those same materials with another peer or with whatever the context is that's relevant.
Really remarkable. And so it's not the child who's engaged in the behavior, it's someone else. Is it important for them to, whoever it is that's modeling the right behavior, is it important for them to be about the same age, or do you find that isn't as important?
Well, that's a really great question. And actually, there are lots of different ways to do video modeling. Maybe I could just quickly talk about...
I would love that.
The most common format is what we call third-person video modeling, which is that I was kind of describing, where we essentially videotape two kids or two adults. Interestingly enough, the research suggests that it doesn't really matter how similar those models are to the child. It always feels better to involve kids as opposed to adults, but the studies that have been done don't show that that's really a key variable for a lot of our students. But with the third-person video modeling, you videotape typically developing kids, let's just say, interacting in an appropriate social way. and then the student has an opportunity to watch them. There's also what's called point of view video modeling that's used more commonly when we're trying to teach like a self-help skill, like washing my hands, brushing our teeth, or perhaps transitioning between classes at school. And then what we do is essentially it's just like those GoPro cameras that the snowboarders wear. You shoot the video as if you were looking through the eyes of the student, and they get to see what it would look like to complete this sequence of behaviors or this behavior, and then they watch it and go do it. And then the third kind of video modeling that's really interesting and got a lot of interest more recently is called video self-modeling. And here what we do is we videotape our actual child, the student we're working with. We may have to prompt them through the sequence, but we shoot lots of video and then we edit it down to show the very child who's going to be watching the video performing this task or this sequence of tasks, these play or social interactions, and then they get to watch themselves doing it the right way through the magic of video editing. Wow. So that's an emerging technology. It takes a little more work, but for a lot of kids, that's really motivating to watch themselves on the TV. So, we've used different strategies for different situations, and there's not any research suggesting that one method works better than the others do. I would say we use that third-person format most frequently because it's the easiest to do, and it seems to work very well. Although I'm interested in exploring more this idea of video self-modeling.
And so I'm curious, in all the instances that you've explained, we're looking at the proper behavior. Do you ever do the reverse and show the behavior that isn't desirable?
Well, there is another technique that's related to video modeling that's it's called video self-evaluation, where we'll videotape the kid in a situation, and then we'll sit down with the student and draw their attention to specific things. But with video modeling, we're really trying to provide that positive model. We're trying to show them, here's what you should be doing in this situation. And the advantage of video modeling is that we can highlight the really important things that the student should be doing. We can filter out all of the extra background noise that is often present when we're trying to provide a live model or use model prompts. And then we also, by using the video model, we ensure that they're seeing that good example in the exact same way every time. There's not a lot of variability that sometimes happens when we have different people using model prompts, for example. So it's got a lot of positive things. And while there's a little bit more work on the front end of creating the video model, after we've created it, then it's simply a matter of sitting the student in front of the computer screen or the DVD player, whatever the technology is we're using, and having them watch it and then immediately go and do it.
I have to say, it makes great sense. It's very exciting to me. Is there an age range where you see that this is more effective, or a skill level that's more effective? Who could benefit from this?
Well, it mainly depends on the student's ability to attend to the screen and their imitation abilities.
Okay.
And then, the task that you choose to teach will vary depending on the developmental level of the child and what their skills are. I focus mostly with preschoolers, and so we're working very heavily on play skills and social skills. But you have to put some thought into how you create the video model. You don't want to be modeling behaviors that are several steps beyond where the child certainly is, because there's nothing magical about it. You want to have a sense of how long if the child's talking, how long are their statements usually, and then the statements that you build into your video modeling scenario should be about at that same level, or maybe 1 or 2 words beyond. But you're not going to put in scripts or statements that you want the child to be saying. You're not going to show in the video model a 10-word statement if our child's only communicating in 3 to 4 word phrases. So what really changes, as long as they've got that basic imitation ability, what changes is the complexity of the skill that you're having them learn, and the context, the length of the interaction, and things like that.
And I certainly have heard of this used for social skills, and I hadn't really thought about it for play skills. So now you've really got me wanting to ask a bunch of questions, because we have a lot of viewers who will write in and say, my child is having difficulty playing at all, or playing with other children. Can you give us an example of a play skill that you've used video modeling with successfully?
Yeah, we actually did a study a few years ago. We were really interested in taking this technology and exporting it to the home. And so we ran a study where we trained an older sibling of one of our students to be the play partner. And so what we did is we created some play scenarios. One was like a doctor scenario. We had like a Fisher-Price doctor kit. And so we scripted out a back and forth interaction about playing doctor. We scripted out a back and forth interaction about playing teacher. So the kind of socio-dramatic play. And then we trained the peer, the older sibling of the child that was the target of our study, how to do his lines. We trained another typically developing peer to play the role of our child. We shot the video. And then each day we had the student sit down with his sibling, they watched the video together, and then had a chance immediately to interact with those same props and materials from the video they just watched. And we trained the peer to just say their lines and not engage in not to do too much prompting, to give our student the chance to do the things that he just saw in the video. And it actually worked really, really well.
I love
got the kids interacting. And the cool thing was, like a lot of structured interventions, once the kids kind of get the gist of that back and forth exchange, they're freed up to do more things. And we actually saw the kids using a lot, making a lot of appropriate statements that weren't things that we directly taught them. They started playing, varying the way they were playing the firefighter script, for example, and doing different ways. And we like a lot of good interventions that are structured, you get more than you pay for, essentially. Once the kids get the gist of the interaction, they're free to, vary and play in a more natural way.
I think this is absolutely remarkable. I know that we're going to get some questions from parents saying, is there a place where I can just order a video being made? You're not aware of anything like that, are you?
I think there are actually some groups that do produce those kinds of video models. I haven't looked at them recently, so I'm not comfortable saying, but I can do some research and let you know if you want to post information someplace else.
Sure. But to be clear, though, where you are, you're making the videos yourself for the individual children.
Yeah, we are. And these days, back when we started doing this research, 10 years ago, it was a lot more effortful than it is now. Everybody's got a smartphone or an iPad. You can shoot this, edit it right there on the iPad, and have it ready to go pretty quickly. It does take some time, but it's more in terms of planning it out and shooting it in a way that makes it very, very clear. Because that's what you want. You want the model to clearly show the appropriate way to engage in this interaction or this sequence of behaviors.
And as you said, not muddy it up with a whole lot of other things going on. So
right.
Very, very clear about that. I thank you so much for shedding some light on this. And we'd love to have you back on the show another time, maybe when we get some more questions from our viewers. I hope that you'd be willing to participate.
Of course, that'd be wonderful.
Thank you so much for being with us, and say hello to everybody in Utah for us.
I will. Great chatting with you.
All right, take care. Really remarkable. I think that this is such an exciting way that we can key in. Obviously, as he said, maybe not for all of our kids, but our kids who love screen time, this is a great teaching tool and something that we can be looking into more. If you already have an ABA provider, I would ask them about if they have a way in which they can include video modeling for your child. A very exciting thing happening in our field. All right, we're going to take a break, and we're going to be back with more of Autism Live after these messages.
This is the second annual ACT Run for autism and military families. We're down here in San Diego. It's absolutely gorgeous morning. All right, let's just start moving. Let's move those feet. I know it's a little chilly. Some of you are just arriving. Hey, you guys are looking good, and I want to remind you, you are running to raise money for an amazing cause. Our military families with a child of autism. You guys are heroes. Thank you.
So are you ready to run? Go!
Someone who's had a lot of friends who've had children with autism, and I'll tell you, there is nothing more heartfelt than watching the support that this organization provides for families and for militaries and for children.
Whoa, look at this little silver bullet on the side. He's gonna win it, oh my gosh, tackle him. Way to throw down a killer personal best, of course, on your Act Today 10K. See, look at that. That is a serious commitment to no limits racing.
A lot of times you hear things about autism, you're hearing about people trying to find a cure, but what happens to the people who are living with it daily with their children? And Act Today supports them with grants and funding for a helmet, for example. They say in the lifetime of a child with autism, you can probably expect to spend about $3 million. So Act Today helps out with this.
1 in 88 military families have autism. That's entirely too much. We have an autism epidemic. It's almost impossible for families to get the care and treatment they need, particularly the military family, who moves on average every 2 years. Oftentimes they have a parent deployed. Their children do not get the care and treatment they deserve.
I hope all of you guys enjoyed running today. We're extremely humbled to get to be the title sponsor of this great event, and it's going to grow every year. We started off as a small company with a big vision, and a few years later now we've donated over $750,000 thanks to generous support and generous marketing from our charitable partners.
All right, here now we go. On 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is international. Beat mega radio smasher. Had the time of my life, and I've never felt this way before. Yes, I swear this is true, and I owe it all to you. Oh, I had the time of my life, and I never felt this way before. And I swear this is true, and I owe it all to you. Pictures, I just wanna make it pop. I was born to get wild. That's my sound.
The fact that you have the band going, you have friends here, you have just a great atmosphere. Why not come out? And you're in Southern California. You can't get better.
I want you to know you made a difference today in the lives of families with children with autism. You guys are amazing. You're activists. You guys rock. Bye, everybody. See you next year.
This event would not be possible if we hadn't had the tremendous support of sponsors.
We encourage everybody, join us next year. The party's going to be bigger and better than ever.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We ask a question every day of you guys, and I'm thrilled that today we have some time to take a look at the answers that you guys have written in. Our question was, what one behavior do you wish you could change? And we said, open policy here. It can be a behavior that you're engaging in, it can be a behavior your child is engaging in, or somebody else, right? And we're getting a bunch of responses, and I'm loving them. Now, I'm thinking about the fact that I'm not good at math, right? In fact, I think I'm in the math challenged category, right? It's really difficult for me. And my son's in 5th grade right now, and my son's kind of extra good at math. And I have to check his homework, and it's really hard for me, and I have said, loudly and under duress, I feel like I'm in 5th grade again, and that I'm having to relearn all these things. Like, I really didn't need to know how to find the area of a complex tetrahedron or whatever they are ever again. I feel like I passed 5th grade, and I got my master's degree, and I really don't need to do that in my day-to-day life. When I'm sitting here, I don't need to find the area of anything, ever. That's not entirely true. When I garden, I need to know the area of things. But for the most part, I can fudge it, right? It's not a skill I'm interested in getting, but it's a skill that I have to get. But what I'm noticing is I'm having to relearn this stuff, because I'm 100% sure that I'm not smarter than a 5th grader. I'm having to go back and learn these things, and I'm seeing with my adult brain, it's a lot more simplistic than it was for me when I was in 5th grade. And one of the things that I'm seeing is there's a formula, and that within the formula, there's all kinds of different things that can happen, but there's a formula. So we're going to talk about these behaviors that you guys have listed, but I want you to know that while all the behaviors, it's not a one-size-fits-all at all, but there is a base formula. Let's say that. So the formula of figuring out what to do to change a behavior is that first we have to understand is that all behavior happens for a reason. Now, if you want to argue that point, we're not going to get further along, but if you do want to argue it, and believe me, I did in the beginning, I was like, no, sometimes behavior is just random. Okay, I will say and admit that I still think that there are still some behaviors that are just random, but then they don't happen again. If it's a behavior that's happened more than once, it is not a random behavior. It isn't. And if you stop and think about this for any length of time, you will come to this idea that, okay, it isn't happening in a vacuum. There's a reaction for everything, right? So if you engage in a behavior and something happens and you choose to behave in it again, there has to have been something that was rewarding for it, right? That thing we talked about, principle number 1 at the start of the show. Any behavior that we do again and again and again, it's because there's some sort of paycheck for it. We get a reward from it. So even these challenging behaviors that somebody wrote in and said, I'd like to change the behavior of the school district. We're going to talk about that. So our behavior, the school district's behavior, our child on the autism spectrum's behavior, our neighbor's behavior, our mailman's behavior, our dog's behavior, all these things, if it keeps happening, there's some sort of a paycheck, right? We call that the function of the behavior. The paycheck of the behavior is what's working about that behavior. I do this and you do that, woohoo. I like when that happens, right? And it's easy to judge and go, well, I wouldn't like it if that happened, right? But that person is liking something about it or they wouldn't keep doing it, right? I remember very distinctly as a child looking up and seeing that old electric burner that was up there and it was red and it was pretty and I wanted to touch it. I wanted to touch it. My mom had told me no, 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 but I reached up and I touched it and it was painful and that was the last time I ever wanted to touch a burner, right? I didn't like the feeling and I don't want to touch the burner ever again. When something is not pleasant to us, and everybody's tastes are different, then we don't want to engage in that behavior anymore. But ABA doesn't focus on that. They focus on the other side of the equation, which is if we are driven by things that we want to have happen, then let's change the variables so that things on the behavior that we want to see, good things happen then. The description that I love that Evelyn Gould has said many times here in the studio, she says, think of it this way, that when you do the proper thing, the lights go on and the party happens. And when you do the not right thing, then the party just doesn't happen. It's not a thing where you get lectured and told, you're not getting the party, right? It's just, there's like nothing happened, right? It's just boring and dull. Not punitive, not punishing, but when you do the right thing, woohoo, the party happens. Okay, so in all of these things, we're going to try to figure out how we would figure out the function of the behavior. And then once we know the function of the behavior, then we can start to think realistically about how can we shift the equation on its end. And when we figure out the function of the behavior, when we do it properly, it's called an FBA, a functional behavior assessment. And it's a very specific process, and we really want to leave that as much as possible to the trained BCBAs. But we can armchair it for some things if it's not life-threatening, right? And I like to practice figuring that out. Okay, so one of the things that somebody wrote in, they said, not exactly a behavior that we wish to change, but what we would like to know is why the hand flapping, why the humming, why the rocking? Is there any other scientific explanation other than being self-stimulatory behavior? And honestly, I'm just going to tell you, because for a long time I called it stimming and I called it self-stimulatory behavior, but I hated calling it because I looked at my son when he did those kinds of things and they weren't stimulatory. It was self-soothing, and I would get irked about it. And then I met with a bunch of experts and they said, well, actually self-stimulatory is not the proper term for it, that they actually call it automatically reinforcing, because it might be that it's stimulatory or it might be that it's soothing. There is something about it that feels good. So I love this question. And what I also love is that somebody wrote in and said, this is why I do the hand flapping. And what he said is, I'll take a stab at this one personally for me, and this is for him, not for every single child, but it gives you an insight into what might be happening with your child. So this young gentleman says, personally for me, the hand flapping, rocking, humming, etc. is sort of a release mechanism. It kind of lets a bit of steam off, and it's also a bit of a visual indicator if I'm starting to struggle with something. I don't know why I do it. I just kind of, I've done it as long as I can remember. Now, I will say that when my child didn't do a lot of rocking, but he did do a lot of hand flapping. And this would happen, a lot. And I remember after he was diagnosed, I had never had a panic attack until after he was diagnosed. And then I had a lot of fear of having another panic attack, because anybody who's ever been through a panic attack, I don't want to feel that way again. And I remember having somebody explain to me that this might be soothing. And I was in a moment where I was starting to feel the panic coming. And and I was like, what can I do to help myself? And I did this, and I have to tell you, it was very soothing to me. There was something about it. It feels, I don't know, when I thought, oh gosh, I kind of get it now. And anybody you've ever seen that's been in grief and they rock, we know that, there are things that happen inner ear when you rock that, why do babies love to be rocked? Some babies find it soothing, other babies don't. Why does a person sit and click their pen compulsively, right? These are automatically reinforcing. There is something about it that is soothing to that individual. So if you have a child who's engaging in hand flapping, and if it is preventing them from engaging in behavior that you want them to engage in, we can't always find out with automatically reinforcing what is the exact thing that it's doing, but we can kind of get an idea of it. And what we want to do is give it a replacement behavior that doesn't prevent them from doing the thing. So if we're trying to teach the child how to write and they're doing this, we're not going to be productive, right? But what we don't want to ever do is just take away the thing that has been reinforcing to them in some way. If this was soothing them or this was stimulating them, there's a need for it. So we've got to find something else that they can do that is not going to prevent them from the writing. I just think it's so important that we know that it's never just, oh, we'll take that away from them. Because without giving a replacement, A, we're not going to be successful, and B, we're going to create the potential for somebody to be very unhappy. And I don't know about you, but I don't want anybody to be unhappy, but especially my precious kid. That's just something that I'm not interested in. So, I'm very fortunate, and believe me that I know this, with my son. He is at an age now and a verbal capability that he and I can have conversations about why. My son always, and still engages in verbal stereotypy, that he will make little noises. And sometimes they're very high pitched, like R2D2 noises. When he's happy, he'll go, and make this little noise. And other times it's stuff way in the back of his throat that when he first transitioned into the world of autism, he stopped speaking and he would have his little characters. He had little, I think they were Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but they were bugs, so I don't know what they were. And so he would have them stand there and he would go and talk like that in the back of his throat. And sometimes he cycles back into it. And it raises my stress level because it was a bad time. But I recently asked him, because he was doing it again, and I said, why do you do that? And he said, because it feels really good. My throat is a little bit, full back here. And when I do that, it just kind of clears it all out. But he couldn't tell me that at 3. And he couldn't tell me that at 4 or 5. So do know, first of all, that it has a purpose. Whatever the behavior that your child is engaging in, it has a purpose. I love talking to Temple Grannon, and she talks about how she would spin that metal plate on the end of her bed, and that her mother eventually said, you can do it an hour a day and that's it. Go do it and then you're done. And she loved to pick up sand and have it fall through her hands. And I said to her, but why? What was it about it? And she said, the metal plate, she said, I still love to do it. I still, love to spin something that's metal, because she said the way the light hits it, and that if I spun it slower or faster, that it made, a different pattern. And she said, it's still fascinating to me visually. And the feel of sand and watching it go down, that there's something visually about it in the way light strikes it that is very soothing to her. So know that it has a purpose, first of all, that it's not random. Will you get to know what the purpose is for your child? I don't know. But I will tell you that when we found ways for my son to communicate when he was feeling anxious about something, and when we found ways for him to communicate about when he was happy about something other than going, he started doing those things more often. I never see my son hand flap anymore, but he does still do verbal stereotypy because it feels good in his head and in his throat. And we have given him other ways, and he does. I'm sure that I could have made it so that he never did vocal stereotypy, but I have to be honest with you, I know lots of people who hum, and I know lots of people who make little noises, and I felt like it's something that's so joyous for him, and it's not preventing him most of the time. I think, and he is capable in certain circumstances when it's not appropriate, like when he's taking a test, he knows that he can't do it, and he's able to stop doing it. For me, that's it. If he's able to control it and have an awareness socially of when it's disturbing other people and clamp down on it during that time and engage in it later, I think that's perfectly acceptable. Each parent has to decide for themselves, right? It's a very personal decision between you and your family, but I do think that there's something freeing about understanding that it has a purpose, that it's not random. Okay, so continuing on, one of the other things that somebody wrote here was the obsession with doors. That we know that a lot of our kids will find something that they're obsessed about, and for some of them, it's opening and closing doors. I really want to encourage you to look and it's not on our site, and Emily, maybe you can help me to know where they can find it. There's a video of Justin Marroquin, and we show it sometimes here on the show, that is part of the Mission Possible series, where my son is included in one of them as well, too, where they take kids who've made progress, and they haven't all made the same amount of progress, right? Justin Marroquin is the exact same age as my son, and he's fully recovered. Seamless recover, but in the early days, and it really tears my ticket when people go, oh, he never had autism. Excuse me. But Justin Marroquin absolutely had autism, and he was one of those kids who could not disengage from a door. Like Laura, his mother, will tell about going someplace and trying to stay in a hotel and spending an hour because he couldn't get on or off the elevator because he was so fascinated with the doors, and how he would, go and slam and open a door and slam and open a door to the point where she was ready to run out into the street herself. And what they did was that they went through a lengthy process with that individual child where they found other things for him that were as reinforcing as the doors. And, but I would encourage you to take a look at the videotape and see where Justin is now, to know that, a child can absolutely get past that when you're working with the right professional, that they can help your child to engage with other things besides the door. And if you think about it, for each child, it could be something different. I mean, there's the whole mechanism of how the door shuts. For kids who are mechanically inclined, that's fascinating. There's a noise that a door makes when you open and close it. There's the feeling of the wind blowing when you shut it fast. So many different things that it could be of why your child is obsessed with doors. But the right BCBA can get in there and observe the behavior and begin to figure out what it is about it and put a replacement behavior in there. It's very effective when you work in that way. One of the next things that somebody wrote in about, when upset, my son hits himself. Hardest thing in the world is to watch your child be so frustrated because they have so much to say, but they can't get it out at that moment. And what I hear there is a mom who is already beginning to understand part of what's happening function-wise here. But anytime it's self-injurious behavior, I really want to urge you and beg you to call on a BCBA. But honestly, be careful that you get a BCBA who has experience with autism and who has experience with self-injurious behavior. Make sure that you ask them that. And if you're already working with an ABA provider, say to them, we need to step up on this. I need an FBA done on this. And part of the equation, I can tell you based on what you're saying, is that they're going to say we need to step up your child's ability to communicate. And sometimes that means giving them an alternative means of communication for an interim or for longer, right? But nothing can be more frustrating to an individual than not being able to say what they need. You know, honestly, if it happened to us, and I've watched, my dad had a stroke. My dad was an incredibly intelligent, articulate professional, and he had a stroke at the age of 51, 52, and the frustration that he went through when he could not find the words to be able to tell you what he wanted. It's not just kids on the autism spectrum. If you have no way to communicate, it is so debilitating to spirit. So we really want to make sure that we give every ability to a child to be able to communicate. It may not be your ideal to give your child some sort of a tablet device that's got a program on it that they can have assisted communication, but please don't think to yourselves, I'm not going to do that because that's going to preclude speech. It doesn't. In fact, science has shown us quite the opposite, that when we give a child who is not yet verbal communication, that over 50% of those kids will then become verbal, and they'll become verbal faster than kids that we don't give the technology to. So really, you know, make sure that you're doing everything you can with your ABA provider to give the most ability to communicate, and that you're reinforcing the you-know-what out of any kind of communication that's happening. And then on top of that, so that's one part of it, right? But on top of that, that you're having someone who is a trained BCBA, an experienced BCBA with self-injurious behavior to help with that self-injurious behavior. Okay, somebody else who says the rambling and the stuttering, it goes on and on. Although he's usually pretty happy and excited about something when he does this, and he seems happy, I'm just a little afraid he will get frustrated with it as he gets older. And I do think, you know, thank you for writing that in, because, and thank you for your sensitivity to your child about the fact that they're happy and they're excited and they're rambling and stuttering. I will tell you that I think it's true that when the kids get older, what's appropriate for a 4-year-old, and that a lot of times you go, well, you know, they're 4, right, isn't going to be appropriate for the 8-year-old. And then when they're 9, the other kids are going to start to pick fun at them. So you do want to make sure that you're working, and it's ideal to start as early as possible so that you don't have to work on it quickly, because the key is working very, very slowly on these kinds of things. I can tell you, I love to talk. I absolutely love to talk, and I get excited, and you see me get excited here. And sometimes my mouth doesn't go as fast as my brain. I get going a little bit too fast. It used to drive my mother crazy when I was a kid. And my mother's method of doing it, which is not ABA, by the way, especially at the dinner table. I loved sitting down to the dinner table because my parents encouraged the free flow of ideas and thoughts, and we were allowed to say our opinions and disagree with them, and I just loved it. And but I would get excited, and my mother hated it. And so what my mother would do is toss a glass of cold ice water across the table at me. I know, it's horrible, right? And then I would cry because I would be humiliated. And it's something that as a mom, I'm always so aware of with my son, that sometimes he gets going and it gets to the point where I can't understand him, and that I always want to be aware of honoring his spirit, that I have to help him to be able to stay communicative, right? But I don't want to ever make him feel like, after we've worked so hard for him to be able to speak, I don't want him to feel like what he's saying doesn't matter, right? Or that it's annoying. So it's a tough, and I really appreciate that you're already thinking in terms of those kinds of things. But you know, if you work with the right BCBA, they can come in with your child and have them feeling that excitement and get them to slow down. You know, whether it's that introducing a toy and saying to them, now I'm gonna give you this toy and it's so exciting, we're gonna talk about this toy and I want you to talk about this toy, but we're gonna practice talking really slowly. And then if you're able to do that, then you're going to get to play with the toy and you can rehearse it beforehand, then bring the toy out so that they get the feel of it, that this is what it feels like to be excited. And this is what it feels like to be excited and talking and not going so fast. It's like, I'm still working on it, you know, but I think it's ideal to work on it. Make sure you're working with somebody who is going to reinforce your child for it. Another person talking about obsessions, and we've had Dr. Doreen Graham-Shea talking about obsessions before, and that obsessions are often tied to anxiety, and that really we have to address the anxiety and move very, very slowly to let them know that it will be okay, whatever that anxiety is, but it takes a level of work, right? It takes time and patience and looking at it and figuring out what exactly is going on. Really intense work. I'm realizing we've gone on a long time. Other people have written in about some things, though, that I really want to discuss. So we're going to take a break and we're going to come back and talk about some more of these, in particular, tantrums and hitting. So stick with us.
Hi, welcome to Camp Discovery, a free-to-play suite of fun, interactive learning games for kids 2 and up, designed by experts in autism. Camp Discovery will open your early learner to a world of new skills, shapes, numbers, colors, locations, emotions, and more. Let's get started.
Please choose a level.
Objects. First, Camp Discovery's Intelligent Preference Assessment determines your child's preferred reward for choosing correctly. Okay, got it. Let's play. Camp Discovery creates a motivating learning environment for your child by minimizing incorrect responses and maximizing successful ones.
Find the shoes.
Respond correctly and your child is rewarded with their favorite animations.
You did it.
Respond incorrectly and our unique prompting system guides your child to the correct answer by making it the largest choice.
That's not it. Try again. Way to go.
Continue to answer correctly and the size gradually reduces until the child makes the correct choice independently.
You win.
Success! Rewards motivate learning. Complete a round and your child is rewarded with a fun mini-game. Track your child's progress with easy-to-read graphs. Multiple settings options allow you to customize Camp Discovery to your child's unique needs. All this in one single app, the Camp Discovery app, available for free on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon Store.
Welcome back. We have been looking at some of the answers that you guys have written into the question of the day. The question of the day was, what one behavior would you like to change? And it was open-ended. It could be a behavior you're engaging in, your child can be engaging in, your significant other. Somebody wrote in and said the school district. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But I wanted to come back and talk about some of these because they're really, really amazing things that you guys have written in. Somebody said the endless questioning about everything. I have to explain every detail of our every move. I know many people have it much worse with kids who are nonverbal, etc., but I wish I could run an errand without explaining why, where, when, how long, what for. I'm sending you an air hug because you and I are related. I remember years ago when my child was just being diagnosed with autism, and I was at somebody else's home, and it was a grandmother, and her 4-year-old grandchild was standing there and was asking 1,000,008 questions. She was like, why? Why is this? Well, why? Who is that? And what are they doing? And she just kept on asking the questions. And the grandmother went, you have a child, right? And I said, yes. And she said, how old? And he was about to be 4 at that point. And she goes, oh, then you know my pain. And because at this stage, it's just endless questions. It drives you crazy. And I burst into tears because, my child wasn't speaking and I was hopeful that he would ever ask a question, right? And then she felt terrible. And I said to a friend, I said, if I ever, and she said, but you do understand what? And I said, oh, I completely understand. I've been around 4-year-olds before and they can drive you batty. And I said, but if my child ever gets to that point, ever gets to that point, and he might get to that point when he's 8, I'm never gonna, be frustrated. I'm gonna love each and every question. And it was about a year later that he asked his first question, and I almost wrecked the car because he asked a question. And it took a couple of more years, but we cycled through that phase where everything was a question. And sometimes the Spanish Inquisition still shows up, and he asks 1,018 questions. And of course, I'm a liar because I get frustrated sometimes. I try to remember, you prayed for this. You prayed for this miracle, but sometimes, we reach our human limits. So the one thing that I want to say to you, and it's something that we've talked about with Dr. Dorian Granpeche before, because sometimes people have written in too, and I've said that my son will do this sometimes too, that we'll be in the car and he'll ask me a question. And usually for him, it can be around food or something that he wants, that he'll say, I'm hungry, when are we having dinner? And I'll say, well, I'm driving the car right now, but we're going to go home and we're going to eat this for dinner. And so, dinner's going to be in a little while, right? Well, and then 5 seconds later, he'll ask me the question again as if he never asked me before. So we have that kind of thing happening with questions. And then we just have the kids who incessantly will ask a question about, why is she doing that? What are we going to do next? How many items do we have to get to the store? How long are we going to be here? Da, 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 da. But the first question that I'm going to ask you is, have you stopped and think about what's really going on? And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case with your child, but in some cases, and I've noticed this with my son and with other people's children, they've said, oh my gosh, that's it. There is a level of uncomfortable that they're experiencing. And when you ask questions, it's because you're wanting to take control of the circumstances a lot of the time. So when my son says to me, I'm hungry, and I say, okay, we're going to eat in a little while, Dr. Granpeche, if she were here, would say to me, in a little while means nothing. Like, you need to say, here's the clock, and, it says 6:13, and when it says 6:37, that's when you're going to get to eat, but you have to be able to deliver then, right? And that a lot of times our kids will, like some of the things you're saying about when you're running an errand, explaining why and where and when and how long and what for, that to me sounds like it's potentially some anxiety. And imagine if I were to come and say to you, I'm picking you up at 3:00 today. Wouldn't you have some questions? Okay, where are we going? I'm picking you up at 3:00 today. And you would want to know, how long are we going to be gone? What are we going to be doing? How do you want to be dressed? Are you going to be back in time to eat dinner? Like, you would have questions, right? I wouldn't expect you to just get in my car and we drive away and that you have no idea where we're going or when we're going to come back, or, there is a certain measure of all of that you would want to know. It's hard with kids because they don't always listen to our responses. But a lot of times giving a kid like that a visual schedule, and you can make one for yourself, where you can say, we're going to these 3 stores, and you can take pictures of those 3 stores. I know it sounds time intensive, but honestly, if it helps your child to reduce their anxiety and ask less questions, you might have more fun. I still, now, when I'm going to go someplace with Jem, he'll say, well, how many places do we have to go? And a lot of times I don't know how many places we have to go, right? So I usually round up. If I know we have to go to 4 places, I'll say around 5, right? And we'll walk into a store and he'll say, how long are we going to be here? How many items do we have to get? And sometimes sometimes he'll say, I've got 8 items that I have to get, and I want you to help me remember them. And I distract him and say, help me to remember these 4 items that you have to remember. Or I'll give him something to do. If I need to shop for a while, that's an ideal time to put his phone and put the headphones on, and we shop, and he's got his tunes, so he's got something else to focus on, right? So that I can still shop and that we can enjoy each other. Other times I don't let him be on the headphones. For the longest time when he was younger, I'd put him in the cart and give him, used to be his DS, now it's his phone. Now he's too big to stick in the cart. He's just too big to stick in the cart. So he's back to not liking shopping. Guess what? My husband doesn't like shopping either. And my husband will say, how long are we going to be here? Nobody wants to just feel like they have no say. So see if you can't quiet, if it is anxiety, and I don't know that it is, see if you can't quiet some of the anxiety. distract him. Play a game if you can while you're shopping. We used to play things like I Spy, especially if we were in line at the checkout and having to wait. There was something about that his anxiety would just ramp up. So we would I Spy something red. And then, I would turn it into something fun and distract. If he's asking questions, answer his question and ask him a question. That's a great way to distract, right? So if he says, where are we going? And you say, we have to go to the store, to the grocery store. Before he can say the why, you can say, what would you like to have for dinner? If he's at that stage where you can have that kind of a conversation. And see if that kind of thing can help you. But know that there is a function there, that part of it, whether it's reducing anxiety to have control, there is a reason why your child is asking questions. See if you can't turn it around and make it something positive. Now, somebody else wrote in and said tantrums and hitting. So important that we figure out what the function of the tantrum is, what the function of the hitting is. I've talked before on the show about doing a 3-column to help yourself out. You take a piece of paper and you fold it into 3s, right? And on the top of the paper, you write A, B, C. We all know our ABCs, right? In behavior, we want to know the A stands for antecedent. What happened right before the tantrum? Then the B is the behavior, and the experts call it the topography of the behavior. You want to write, what it was, how long it went on, did they kick, did they hit, did they bite, what did they do? And then the C is the consequence. What was the consequence for the behavior? Now, I recommend that you if your child's engaging in tantrums, you start this kind of a log. It's a behavior log, an ABC, behavior log. They call it the 3 contingents, but the ABC is a behavior, right? And so when the tantrum is happening, make sure that you're not feeding it by giving it attention and you're not giving into it. So if you're someplace and the child wanted something and you didn't give it to them and then they engage in the tantrum, make sure you don't give in to them, right? You don't give the thing that you're doing. And try not to, you never ever ignore the child, but once you've secured the area and made it safe, don't give attention to the behavior. It feels horrible. Just going to put that out there. It feels terrible. You feel like a bad parent. And especially if you're in public and people are like, why aren't you doing something? And, the child is snotting themselves and screaming and trying to overturn the shopping cart. My child's done that and turned over the shopping cart in the middle of a tantrum in Whole Foods. Right? But you don't get into a discussion with them while it's happening. Think like a scientist and think to yourself, what exactly are they doing? What happened before? The next opportunity that you have when they're safe and you're safe and it's over, start with the behavior because that will be freshest in your mind, won't it? And then write down what the consequence is. And that's sometimes the hardest because that's the clear thinking moment when you go, oh, right after it was over, I gave him a lollipop. Oh, that was probably not the best thing I could have done. Forgive yourself. Just note it. And then go back and think, what was happening right before? And then if the tantrums are getting bigger and huger and lasting longer, have somebody else come in and help you to look at why this is happening. There are lots of ways to head a tantrum off, but it depends on what the function of it was. I always talk about the 4 usual suspects. There's really only 4 main reasons why a child usually engages in a tantrum. 1, because they want to get access to someone or something. They want that toy. They want to be with mom. They want that lollipop, right? Or they want to escape someone or something. You said it's time to turn off the TV and go to bed, and they throw a hissy fit so that they're not going to bed. They, ran down the street away from you because they didn't want to work on the thing that you wanted to work on. So escape is a big one. Then the even bigger one is attention. People do things for attention, and remember that this one, it's sort of a crazy one because a lot of times we think it's positive attention. No, somebody who is attention deficit, that they haven't gotten enough attention. I'm not talking about ADD, ADHD. They haven't gotten enough attention. Bad attention is great. If you're yelling at them, that's attention. I know that's weird, but it's true. And then the last one is when it's automatically reinforcing, which we've already talked about a little bit, that it has some sort of pleasurable. I think that, and by the way, it can be more than one. And I don't know when the last time was that you threw a tantrum. There can be something that feels good about it, to finally blow and yell and go, I'm done, right? I think every parent has done that at some point, right? That it just feels good to finally explode and let it all out. And so for our kids, sometimes it can be that as well too. But usually for a tantrum, there's something else going on too. It's that attention, that escape, or access to someone or something. And the real true reality that hurts is that if your child is doing multiple tantrums, it means that somewhere they're getting one of those three things. They're getting out of something, they got attention for it, or they got access to someone or something for it, and you got to pinch off the supply to those things. It looks different in all of those cases. If somebody wants attention, then you're not going to give attention to the behavior, but you're going to find ways to give them attention for everything else. You're going to try to pile the attention on so the tantrum never happens, but if the tantrum does happen, you're not going to give the attention. But if it's to escape something, you're going to give them a bunch of attention because you're not going to let them escape. If they throw the tantrum because they don't want to go to bed, you're going to be giving them attention because you're going to be picking them up and putting them in bed and keeping them there in bed. Not, physically restraining them, in a horrible way, but keeping them in bed with, tons and tons of attention. But depending on what the function is, two entirely different ways of going about the intervention. So the function, what's the function? That's going to be one of the most important things. And then two quick things here. Somebody said, I just wish I knew what my child was thinking. That's what I wish. That was my biggest wish. And I tell you that we did quality ABA, and I now can ask him, what are you thinking? And he can tell me. Don't give up on that. That's a good thing to wish for. And then for the person who said, I wish that I could change the behavior of school districts, therapists, and private contractors who benefit greatly, we can when we all stick together, because what's reinforcing for them 9 times out of 10 is that they get access to more money rather than spending it on our kids. And when we convince them that they're not going to save money, that is when they will change the behavior. I will say too that in some cases the administrators are afraid because they don't know what to do. So when we get them training and when we teach them it's less expensive to do it this way, they are starting to turn around, and we just need to hold that line. We're so out of time. Tomorrow, Dr. Doreen Grandpichet is going to be here with us, and she's going to be answering your questions live on the show. Make sure that you're writing in. Then we have Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and a very special guest, Jenny Wu, is going to be with us, and she's going to be talking about what it's like being a military family that has autism in their family. You're not going to want to miss it. Really emotional. Until then, please give your child a hug from me and keep after it. We can do this, right? Bye-bye for now.